The wheels of Alessia's wheelchair left shallow tracks in the sand as Sebastian guided her down a deserted trail flanked by sun-scorched boulders and creosote bushes. The late afternoon light cast long, amber shadows across the Mojave floor, each step away from the road tightening the knot in her stomach. "Are we almost there?" she asked, trying to keep her voice from trembling. Sebastian didn't look at her when he answered, his tone clipped and void of warmth. "Somewhere you won't slow me down anymore." The words hit harder than the heat radiating off the earth. Alessia turned, stunned, but he was already pulling her suitcase from the back of their SUV. A blanket, a water bottle, a flashlight. That's all he left her with. "You'll figure it out," he muttered. And before she could protest, the engine roared to life and the vehicle shrank into the distance, a cloud of dust marking the trail of her abandonment. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that, far off on a ridge, a camera lens glinted in the dying light. Someone was watching, and everything was about to change. Just a year ago, Alessia Vega's life had looked like something out of a design magazine, because it was. At 35, she had become one of the most sought-after eco-architects in California, known for turning sustainable vision into sculptural beauty. Her award-winning firm, Vega Studios, had redefined desert living, and her modernist home in Palm Springs, a glass-wrapped oasis of light and air, stood as both her sanctuary and her signature. She had married Sebastian Vega, a charismatic real estate developer whose charm and ambition matched her own. To the outside world, they were the dream team, stylish, successful, inseparable. But before Sebastian, there had been Luca Moreau. Back in graduate school at UC Berkeley, Alessia had loved him in a way that left a mark, raw and real. Luca, a wilderness documentarian, had been everything Sebastian wasn't. Unpredictable, soulful, and grounded in a life lived off the grid. They parted because of diverging dreams, hers anchored in structure, his in open sky. But Alessia had always wondered, if stability came at the cost of that kind of depth, was it ever truly safe? Looking back from the silence of the desert, the carefully curated perfection of her old life now felt like the most fragile facade of all. It happened on a clear spring morning, the kind Alessia always loved, where sunlight danced off steel beams and possibility filled the air. She had been inspecting the rooftop terrace of a new project, her vision finally taking shape in desert stone and glass. One misstep on a loose plank, and everything changed. The fall shattered more than her spine. It fractured the life she had meticulously built. Multiple surgeries followed, then months of grueling rehab. When she finally returned home, it wasn't to a warm embrace, but to Sebastian's strained smile and a house suddenly full of limitations. Her studio projects were quietly reassigned. "Just while you recover," he'd said, taking over business operations under the guise of support. But Alessia felt it. The shift, the looks of pity, the clients who stopped calling. Her hands, still full of ideas, were now seen as incapable of delivering them. She told herself it was temporary, that things would return to normal. But deep down, she feared that the life she had before the fall wasn't just paused, it had ended. And no one seemed more eager to bury it than the man she once trusted most. At first it was subtle. Sebastian stopped asking her opinion on firm projects, saying he didn't want to stress her out. Then came the password changes, the unexplained financial decisions, the meetings she was no longer invited to. When Alessia confronted him, he smiled thinly, brushing off her concerns with practiced charm and patronizing affection. "You need to focus on healing," he'd whisper, as if she were a fragile ornament about to crack. But what truly broke her heart wasn't the isolation. It was Imogen. Young, poised, and endlessly capable, Imogen had been hired as an assistant, yet somehow became a permanent fixture in their home, her laugh echoing through hallways that had once been filled with warmth. Alessia watched the shift in Sebastian's gaze, the way he came alive in Imogen's presence and recoiled from hers. Friends stopped visiting, unsure how to act around her wheelchair or too dazzled by Sebastian's public narrative of being a devoted husband. Alessia began to vanish, not just from the world, but from her own life. The man who once vowed to build dreams with her now made her feel like the ruin of one, and even as she tried to hold on, to believe that love could outlast circumstance, she couldn't deny the truth slowly hardening around her. She was no longer a partner in her marriage. She was a burden he was learning how to abandon. The message came unexpectedly, a text from Sebastian late one afternoon. "Pack light. I'm taking you somewhere special. Just us." Alessia stared at the screen, her heart stumbling between hope and caution. After months of distance and coldness, this sudden gesture felt like a flicker of the man she had married, the one who once surprised her with rooftop picnics and whispered dreams of desert hideaways. When he helped her into the car that evening, he was unusually attentive, fastening her seatbelt with a softness she hadn't felt in ages. They drove past the city limits, out toward the vast stillness of the Mojave, the air thick with silence and fading light. "You'll love it," he said when she asked where they were going. "It's quiet, untouched, like a reset." His voice held no affection, only a performance. But Alessia, desperate to believe in the possibility of reconnection, swallowed her unease. As the roads narrowed and cell service vanished, she gazed out at the rust-colored horizon and told herself he was trying, that maybe, beneath the bitterness, Sebastian still saw her as his partner, not a problem to be solved. But in the darkening quiet of the desert, her intuition stirred uneasily. Something about this trip wasn't a return. It was a farewell. The SUV rolled to a stop in a barren stretch of the Mojave, where the silence was so complete it rang in Alessia's ears. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting jagged shadows across the sand and stone. Sebastian stepped out without a word, retrieving her wheelchair from the back with a mechanical precision that sent a chill through her. When she asked, trembling, if they were staying here, he didn't answer right away, just opened the door and helped her into the chair without looking at her face. Then came the duffel bag, a single blanket, a half-empty bottle of water, a flashlight. "You've survived worse," he said flatly, his voice stripped of warmth. "I can't do this anymore. Imogen and we're starting over, without you." Alessia's breath caught in her throat as panic clawed up her spine. "You can't leave me here, please." "This isn't you." But his eyes were cold, far beyond reason. "You'll figure it out. Maybe someone will find you, or maybe not." The door slammed. Gravel crunched under tires. Then, nothing. Just wind, dusk, and the realization that he truly meant to leave her, paralyzed, alone, and hundreds of miles from help. Alessia's hands trembled on the armrests of her wheelchair as tears blurred the line between disbelief and terror. She wasn't just discarded, she was sentenced. And somewhere in the growing dark, the desert exhaled around her like a predator waiting for the night. The sound came first, a faint crunch of gravel beneath deliberate footsteps, too steady to be wildlife, too slow to be Sebastian returning. Alessia froze, her breath shallow, the flashlight trembling in her grip as she scanned the horizon, heart hammering. Then, from behind a cluster of boulders, a figure emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, backlit by the moon. For a terrifying heartbeat, she braced for the worst, but then he stepped into the glow of her light, and everything inside her shifted. "Alessia?" The voice was low, familiar, edged with disbelief. Her breath caught. "Luca?" His name left her lips like a question and a lifeline all at once. Luca Moreau. Her college love, the man who vanished into the wilds a decade ago, was suddenly here, in the very desert that had almost swallowed her. Dirt-streaked and sun-worn, he crossed the space between them with urgency, kneeling beside her without hesitation. "Are you hurt? Can you move?" She couldn't speak, could barely nod as the tears broke free. "He left me," she whispered. "Sebastian, left me here to die." Luca's expression darkened, his eyes scanning the horizon where the dust had long since settled. "Not tonight," he said, lifting her into his arms with the ease of someone used to carrying weight heavier than his own. "You're not dying out here. Not on my watch." And as he began the long walk toward whatever safety lay beyond the darkness, Alessia clung to the strange truth that somehow the one man she had let go had found her at the exact moment she needed him most. Luca's shelter appeared like a mirage rising from the desert floor. An off-grid, solar-powered earthship built from reclaimed materials, tucked between sandstone outcroppings and shaded by hand-planted mesquite trees. Alessia had barely noticed it during the long, silent trek in his arms, her body trembling from shock and exposure, her mind reeling with the weight of betrayal. Inside, it was unexpectedly warm, organized and built with rugged purpose. Thick adobe walls, wide doorways, thoughtful accommodations that she'd later realize weren't just coincidence. As he settled her onto a cushioned bench near a clay fireplace, Luca knelt and gently wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders. "Why were you there?" she finally asked, her voice cracking. Luca looked at her for a long moment. "Because something didn't sit right. I've been back in the area filming resilience in extreme environments. I drove past your place a few times. Then yesterday I saw Sebastian loading you into the car like cargo. I followed." His words were simple, but the gravity of them made her chest ache. "You were watching me?" "I was worried," he admitted. "The way he handled you, I knew something was off." Alessia closed her eyes. The truth burned behind her lids. She had been disappearing, and only one person, one she hadn't seen in a decade, had truly seen her. Not as a burden, but as someone worth saving. In the safety of his desert refuge, the tears came without shame, and for the first time in months, they were met not with silence, but with steady hands and the quiet promise of protection. By morning, Luca had transformed his quiet refuge into a makeshift operations center. A satellite uplink blinked steadily beside his laptop, and a corkboard was already filling with printouts and notes. "We're not just surviving this," he told Alessia as he handed her a cup of tea. "We're fighting back." With the help of Nora Lee, a civil rights attorney Luca had worked with on a previous documentary, Alessia began to dig through the digital fragments of her past. They recovered her old cloud backups, archived contracts, client emails, and business registration papers, all proving she had once owned and operated Vega Studios independently. Meanwhile, Luca contacted Micah Reyes, a retired desert rescue expert who agreed to help verify the terrain and timeframes around the location Sebastian had abandoned her. Micah's drone footage and Luca's own photos from the night before began to form a timeline. Everything Sebastian had tried to erase, her authority, her autonomy, her name, was coming back to life through evidence and witness accounts. "We'll show a pattern," Nora explained over a secure call. "Financial abuse, emotional coercion, attempted abandonment with intent to harm." Alessia nodded slowly, her spine straightening in the wheelchair. For the first time since her fall, she wasn't just reacting, she was reclaiming. Every file she reopened, every login she reset, wasn't just about justice, it was a declaration. She wasn't broken. She was building something again, brick by brick, truth by truth. And this time, no one would take it from her. As the pieces of the case fell into place, the weight of what was coming began to settle over Alessia like the heat of the desert sun. Inevitable, scorching, and heavy with consequence. Luca had helped her begin basic physical therapy again, lifting small weights, stretching frozen joints, guiding her gently each morning with the same quiet patience he used to track wildlife through unforgiving terrain. But today, his calm had a sharper edge. "Sebastian's already talking," he said, showing her a clip from a local news broadcast. There he was, her husband, standing on the steps of their Palm Springs home, crocodile tears gleaming as he told the cameras that his disabled wife had vanished after a mental health episode. The lies hit like a second blow. "He's setting the narrative," Luca said, voice tight. "He's painting you as fragile, as unstable." Alessia stared at the screen, her jaw clenched. "Then we need to change the story." With Nora and Micah's help, they drafted a plan, record a statement before going to the police, on their terms. Meanwhile, Detective Layla Monroe, now looped into the operation, began preparing the warrant filings. "We hit them hard," Nora said. "One move, all at once. Legal, financial, and narrative. But you have to be ready, because the second you go public, you can't go back." Alessia looked around the cabin, at Luca, at the folders and files that now represented her truth. "Good," she said, the fire in her voice unmistakable. "I'm done hiding." The camera rolled in the quiet sanctuary of Luca's desert home, its single red light blinking steadily as Alessia sat framed by natural adobe walls and filtered sunlight. No makeup, no staging, just truth. Her posture was upright in the wheelchair, her eyes clear and steady as she looked straight into the lens. "My name is Alessia Vega," she began, her voice calm but unyielding. "3 days ago, my husband drove me into the Mojave Desert and left me there to die. I am disabled, but I am not helpless, and I am not invisible." Her words landed like stones, deliberate and undeniable. She described the pattern of control, the financial manipulation, the erasure of her role in her own company, the emotional gaslighting that led up to the night he walked away without looking back. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," she said. "It was abandonment with intent." There was no anger in her voice, only precision, resolve, and something far more dangerous to the lies Sebastian had built: credibility. When the camera stopped, the room was silent. Luca stepped forward, squeezing her shoulder with quiet pride. "That," Nora said, already uploading the footage to trusted media contacts, "is going to change everything." And it did. Within hours, the narrative shifted. Alessia was no longer a vanished wife with issues. She was a survivor, stepping out of the shadows with evidence, allies, and a voice no one could silence. The news broke just before dawn. Sebastian Vega, once hailed as a visionary developer, had been arrested at his office in downtown Palm Springs. He was mid-interviewed with a lifestyle podcast, still spinning tales of his wife's fragile state, when uniformed officers entered the glass-walled room and placed him in handcuffs. Alessia watched the footage from Luca's laptop, unmoving as the host stammered and Sebastian's face shifted from confusion to rage. At the same time, police executed search warrants at their home, seizing documents, encrypted devices, and a hidden file of offshore account transfers. Imogen, found on the property, was questioned on the spot. Emails between her and Sebastian detailing plans for a future free of Alessia left little room for denial. Within hours, Alessia's recorded statement had gone viral, played on every major outlet. Her calm, composed delivery undercut Sebastian's entire narrative. Nora confirmed that the DA had approved multiple charges: attempted murder, financial fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of a vulnerable adult. In one day, Alessia had gone from missing person to national headline. The architect who rebuilt her own justice. As night fell over the desert, Alessia sat outside the Earthship beneath a sky studded with stars. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt still, anchored. The battle wasn't over. Not with trials and testimony ahead, but the worst of the storm had passed. The man who left her to die was behind bars, and for the first time in a long, long time, the future belonged to her. 6 months later, the desert sun poured through the glass storefront of a modest but striking new space in downtown Palm Springs, the headquarters of Vega Accessible Design, Alessia's rebirth in bricks and vision. The walls bore her signature style: raw textures, clean lines, warmth drawn from earth tones and sunlight. But this time, the mission wasn't just aesthetics, it was inclusion. Her firm specialized in consulting for accessible architecture, helping others design with dignity in mind. Alessia sat behind her desk, no longer confined but commanding. She still used her wheelchair most days, though with physical therapy and fierce determination, she could now walk short distances with a cane. Across the room, Luca pinned up a new client map, his documentary work now intertwined with her mission. They hadn't labeled what they were to each other. There was no rush. What mattered was the steadiness, the way he stood beside her as a partner, not a rescuer, That afternoon she held a press briefing, not about trauma but triumph. "I was left behind," she told the room, "but I was never lost. I simply had to build my way forward." Cameras flashed, applause followed, and as she wheeled to the front window to watch the sunset gild the desert one more time, Alessia felt no trace of bitterness, only purpose and peace. The Mojave hadn't buried her, it had unveiled her, and from its silence she had risen, not broken, but beautifully redesigned. The story of Alessia Vega teaches us that strength is not the absence of hardship, but the refusal to be defined by it. After a devastating injury and a betrayal meant to erase her completely, Alessia chose not to disappear. Instead, she reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her future. Her journey reveals how resilience is born not from perfection, but from persistence, from the quiet, painful moments where you decide to keep going even when the world turns its back. Through Alessia, we learn that justice isn't always immediate and healing doesn't come easily, but with courage, truth, and the support of even one person who truly sees you, it's possible to rise again. She didn't just survive what was done to her, she transformed it into fuel, into a mission, into a new life that would empower others. Perhaps most powerfully, the story reminds us that vulnerability is not weakness. Being left behind did not make her less. It revealed who she truly was. And in the end, the woman Sebastian tried to abandon became the architect not only of beautiful spaces, but of her own redemption. The lesson is clear: even in the ruins, we can rebuild, and sometimes better than before.